Let's start again. So everybody got up to this point where you can see which button is being touched and all 9 of your buttons are showing the proper number. It's important. If they're not, then later on there will be problems. Okay, so now we have up to that point. Now what should happen when I touch here? Right now it just shows button touched and prints a number, but that's not what we want. What do we want to see there? X or O, depending upon whose turn it is, right? So in our model, we said it's always X who is going to start. Okay. So to be able to use the model here in the controller, what do we need? What do we need here? What did we do with the calculator model after creating it? To use it, we instantiated it in the controller. We need an instance of the model here. So that's what we'll do. You will instantiate the model here. Let's call a variable the game model, and this will be will create it as an object of the model class that you created. So whatever it will be your first name underscore game model. Okay, so we have the game model. Now from the game model we can find out whose turn it is and display that in the square that was just touched. Okay, so that's what we'll do. The square that was touched is this object sender. So what we want is we want sender, and we want to change the display, the value that it is displaying. So it happens to have a function called set title. Just like label has set text, buttons have a set title. So we'll choose that. Okay, sender dot set title. What is the title going to be? From a blank it is going to turn into X or O depending upon whose turn it is. So that's what we'll do. The game model dot whose turn. So that's going to become our title. And what is this state business? UI control dot state. So buttons, UI button objects, they can have different states. Like when you press the button, first it is in the normal state, then it is in the pressed state, then it is in the released state. All these different states. It could be an inactive button. And you can have a different title for each state. In our case, we want to go with just normal. We'll just say dot normal. If you type dot normal there, it is going to set the title for the normal state. Now run it and see what happens. So now we'll build the model step by step. What is it?
All X is printing.
It's only printing X, right? Because whose turn is X and we have not changed it. So that is the expected behavior. We in the game model we initialized whose turn to X. So all it is going to do is keep on printing X unless we change whose turn after each move. So we need to update the model now. After a move has been played, we need to toggle whose turn. So let's do that. So everybody done with this here? This part is okay. Can we move? Okay, we'll just wait for a second. So those of you who want to move along, open your model, the game model, and we will implement a function in there which is going to toggle things, which is going to do everything that should happen when a move has been played. Okay, so we'll go to the game model and we'll start implementing a function. We are going to call it play move, and within play move we will tell this function which square the move is on, which square was touched. So we'll use the same word tag as the variable name and its type as integer. So this will receive a one argument of type integer, and the variable name it will have is tag. Okay, so we started with the blank touched somewhere. Whose turn was X? Whose turn's value was X? This was all blank. What should happen? What are the things that should happen when somebody touches a square? So we'll print an X there. That's one thing that will happen, that we are already doing. Let's say the center was touched. We are able to print X. But what we are not doing is what should happen to the model? The model needs to know that a touch occurred on which square, by which player. So right now we know the player was X because it starts with X. So we need to update all those things. So after X has played, what will whose turn become? O, right? So we need to change this to O, and we need to store in this square contents the array we declared, this array. We need to know if, let's say, the fifth square was touched, that it has an X now. We need to know that. So this, the fifth element, square content, the fifth element will assign it to whatever the whose turn was. If it was X, it will be X. If it was O, it will be O. So that's the first thing we'll do. We'll assign the square contents, and after that we'll toggle the whose turn. So square contents tag whose turn, and then we'll toggle the whose turn. So there is a way to write this if else in one line. Some of you might know that. How do you do that? So we have created this function, but we need to call it from somewhere, right? Where will we call it from? Game view controller. So over here in game view controller, where we are setting the title, after that we can call this play move. And what is going to be the value of the tag that we need to pass? See, right now it is a placeholder. This int is a placeholder. We need to give it an actual value. So what is the value we'll pass? What were we printing? No, it's an integer. So we were printing which button was touched, right? The same thing we need to pass, sender.tag. So that will be our argument. So that is the, so if it's the first button, this will be, you remember those tags we assigned before the break. That is what we are passing. So now run your app and see if you are getting alternate X's and O's. We are seeing the grid now and you are getting alternate X's and O's, right? What is not happening? It doesn't tell you.
It doesn't give us the results.
Yes, does not tell you the game is over. Or what happens if you click on top of something that is already here? It changes, right? It will change based on whose turn it is. It will keep changing them. So there are some problems we need to fix. So let's start with the first one, which is we don't want things to change once they have been entered. So once a square has something in it, we won't change it. So let's add that part of the code here. So what we will do is we'll say if. So basically we know that a square is filled if the title that we are setting, if it is an X or an O, the square is filled. So that's the check we will put. If the current title is either an X or an O, we'll just return from here. We won't go do the rest of the things. We don't care. That square was filled, that touch is invalid. So now run it and see if at least that problem is fixed. So Bikramji, what happened? Nothing happens. Same, you can click on another and it changes. It doesn't change anymore. That's what we were trying to do. So once you place an X or an O in a square, if you click on it again and again, nothing happens. That was the behavior. So we fixed one problem. Now the other problem that we want to fix is when there are 3 in a row, the game is over. So how do we know when the game is over? We need to use this, we need to implement another function, whether the game is finished or not. So let's do that. Go back to your game model and before the last curly bracket, add another function called is game finished. And generally speaking, when you declare a game function like is something, has something happened, is something true or not, it should return a value. And we'll choose the value type as boolean, so it will return true if the game is finished or it will return false. Okay. So in how many ways can the game be finished? 8 different ways in which a game can be won. But how many different ways the game can be finished? So let's say one way is somebody wins the game.
Yeah. 3 ways.
Oh, 3 ways, yes. What are the 3 ways?
Draw,
Cross, go, and draw, and no more moves remaining, right? So those are the 3 ways. So what we know that it's a draw when all 9 squares are full. That's one thing we know. Also, for somebody to win the game, what is the minimum number of moves?
like 4, 6, like including both players.
So for somebody to win, minimum number of moves? 5. So somebody plays. If the first person who started wins in 3 moves, then the other player has played 2 moves, right? So minimum is 5. So if there are less than 5 moves, the game is not over. We don't need to check anything. So we just check, have 5 moves been played? If not, the game is still going on. So what we will do is we will keep track of how many moves have been played. So at the top here, add another variable called number of moves played and initialize it to 0. And at the end of this play move function, before the closing bracket of the function, we'll increment it by 1. Number of moves played, add 1 to it. So every time a move is played, it will be incremented. Okay, once you have added these two things, added the variable declaration and this line 37 here, we can go to this function and put in a first check is if number of moves played is less than 5, return false because game is not finished. And also we already discussed that if all 9 squares are full, then the game is finished. So that's what we'll do. If number of moves played is equal to 9, return true. And then whatever logic we need after that, if these two things are not true, then we need to look at that array and decide if somebody has won. So at this point what we'll do is, just so that we can compile this and run it right now, we're just going to return a false. We'll just pretend that the game is not over. If we don't have a return, it will complain because this is a function that returns something and it must return. So when you have this much, you run and you should be able to play up to 9 moves. Actually, there is not much we are doing right now because we haven't called this function yet. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Once you have all done this, we'll go to the other class and add a function call to this. Go back to the game view controller, and at this point we are changing the title, etc. here. After the move has been played, let's call that the function that we just created. If the game is finished, oh, actually we can do something better. See, right now my game state, it just says game state regardless of what is going on. So let's change this as well. So what we'll do is, if the game is finished, we'll change that label. That's our label, game state label. Game state label, yeah, we'll use video game terminology, game over. Else we'll change it to, what will it, we want it to say whose turn it is, right? So we'll do exactly that, the game model dot whose turn, and then we will add some, so basically either it is going to say the game is over or this, but I have a problem. What is the problem? Cannot assign value of type string to type UI label. What do we need? Dot text. Dot text. So you will say game state label dot text. in both places. So now let's run it, and now we should be able to see whose turn it is, and also when all 9 squares are filled, it will say game over. So anybody got it working yet? You see whose turn it is, and you see at the end it says game over. Perfect. This is we are getting from the model whose turn it is, because we are changing. When X has played, it becomes O's turn. So this we are appending some text to it. So for example, if I click here now, see what happens to this. It will keep changing between O and X. Better? I see that some of you have got very nicely laid out colorful game boards. And now where we are at is right now we can detect the touches as they are happening, but we don't know when the game is actually somebody has won. That's the part we are going to do next. So over here we'll now implement this check if somebody has won. So what we need for that is, and see how we are building this incrementally. So also to give you an idea of the thought process that you can use to solve any kind of problems like this for implementation. So we are building it slowly. First we got an empty game board. It had all X's, then we got rid of the X's, then we were listening to the buttons, and then the buttons were always printing X, and then we changed that to X and O alternate. Then we added this function which detects if the game is, number of moves is less than 5. So like that, we are adding a little bit at a time until we get to a point where it is a fully functional game. So our next step is to go through this array. We need to iterate over it. So there are various ways of doing it. For example, in JavaScript or Java, you will say for I equal to 0, I less than the number of elements, I plus plus. And then inside you will say array square bracket ith element of the array. In Swift, there is, and even in other languages, you will find there is a way to use an iterator. So we will say for winning combo, I'm going to call it, that is going to refer to one out of those 8 possibilities in. So basically one out of those at a time, it is going to iterate one by one, and it will be assigned the variable name winning combo. So the first element that it will get is this 1, 2, 3. And what we need to check is the first, second, and third square. When it is, for example, it is this 2, 5, 8, then we need to check the second, fifth, and eighth square. So this is the index of in the grid that we need to check, right? So let's get that out of it. We'll call it index 1, index 2, and index 3. So the first element is index 1. The second element is index 2. And the third element is index 3. So now we know whether it is 4, 5, and 6 or 3, 6, and 9. We know that much. And where are we keeping what is in each square? Which variable has them? In the model, out of all the variables we have declared, which variable knows if a square has got an X or an O? Here, look at these. Square contents. So if square contents index 1, index 2 and index 3 are all the same, meaning whatever is in that those three squares is the same thing, it has won the game. Now, do we need to check for both if they are all x's or they are all o's, or can we check for just one? Or just one? Which one?
Maybe X or we can choose only one.
So who can win the game? So let's say somebody just played a move and that was X. So if X is just played, can O win the game?
It's a 50% probability.
No, if X has just played.
Yeah, it's have more probability than O because if we can.
See, if X has played, meaning O had not won the game. So if X has played, only X can win the game because then it's making a line of 3. So whoever has just played can win the game. So if X has played, we just need to check if all three of them are X's or not, and then keep moving. We don't need to worry about O. If O has just played, then we need to just check if they're all O's. Imagine two people are playing X and O. So for somebody to win, that person was the last person to move. It's impossible that somebody. Because that tells us that we don't need to check for both. We can check for one. We have less code to write. So for that we need to know who was the last person to play, and we will track that now. So at the top, add another variable called last played and assign it to an empty string. And in our play move, before we toggle whose turn, so this is your variable declaration here, line 14, get that in. And over here, in this, right after this line, square contents will say last played equal to whose turn. So this was the last person to play. Okay. So once we have this in, we can now use the logic here. We can implement the logic. So everybody got this in. Can I move forward? Okay. So over here, what we want to check is if square contents, all three of them, index 1, index 2 and index 3. So one by one, if it is equal to last played and square contents index 2 is equal to last played, so if all three are equal, then the game is over. Won by last played, right? This is what has happened. So from here we can actually, one thing we can do is we can return true, but before that we will also record who won the game. So who won the game is last played, and we need another variable to store it, because that's the next question that's going to come from the controller. If the game is over, what was the result? Did somebody win it or was it a draw? So we need that as well. So once you have all of this, we'll go back up and declare another variable. Okay, so at this point, if you have got all of this in, you can scroll up, and even if you don't have it, just scroll up and add this variable, and then you can continue. I'll scroll down again. Add a variable who won and assign this also to a blank string. So this you need, who1. Once you've declared the variable, we'll use it here. We'll say who1 is last played. So it was X, it would be X. If it was O, it would be O, and we will return true from here. Now this gives us the opportunity to enhance our function in the controller. So now let's go to the game view controller, and our function here, our function, when it returns that the game is finished, now we have more information. So instead of saying game over, we can display who won the game, right? So we will get that variable, let winner equal to the game model dot who won. That's the winner. And if the winner is X, we know X has won. If it's O, we know O has won. And if it's a draw, that who won variable will remain empty, right? So that's what we are going to do. We are going to use that. If winner dot, we'll check its length. If the length is greater than 0, meaning it has got a value. So the length we check in Swift using this variable count. We saw this in calculator, didn't we? To check the length of a string. If winner, the length of this variable is greater than 0, then we will say game state label equal to whoever is the winner won the game. Else you want to put this inside the else, the game over, and maybe make it into a draw, game draw, or just draw. And I have the same problem as before. I forgot to add the dot text. So if you're getting an error on this line, I have it on line 44, your line number may be different. Just make sure it has got the dot text on it. I had missed it the first time. And now run the game and see if you can, if it tells you if X or O has won. So how many of you can, your game tells you that the game is over when somebody has won or when it's a draw? Draw is working. What about when X is the winner? Working. O is the winner, also working. Okay. So for some people it does not seem to be working. If it's not working, here are the things you want to check. No, this should not. Okay. So after the game is won, it allows you to keep on playing. Right? So once the game is finished, you can keep on playing and it will keep on recording new moves. So we have a problem. How do we fix that? We will do it here. In the controller, let's declare another variable, a class variable. In the game view controller,
Sir, I'm with, but it's still showing that it's not.
it is still showing its draw. Okay, so we'll create a variable. So go ahead and do this, Vikramjit. Create a variable in the game view controller called game finished and false. So if the game finished variable becomes set to true, we'll stop accepting any commands in the any new touches in the square touched. And this is false by default. So that's what we'll do here. When the game is finished, we'll set it to true. This is the line I just added here. This is inside this if block. Is game finished? Game finished equal to true. You can also add it right at the beginning. It doesn't matter where it is. So it was false to begin with. Now it will become true.
Can you show the variable we declared?
Line 15 here. Okay, so you declare the variable and you assign its value to true inside this if game model dot is finished. You can do it right at the top also, doesn't matter where you do it. So now game finished is true. So now what we want is if sender dot current title is x. So if the square is already occupied, or add another or to it, or game finished. So if game is finished, then just return, don't do the rest of the stuff. So once you add this and run the game, then after the game is finished, you will notice that it won't do anything else. It won't accept any more touches. It's okay if you can't. What happens if you win the game on the last move? What does it show? It shows as a draw, right? It doesn't show as somebody won.
Yeah, that's what
So we need to fix that. Okay, so we have a problem that if you run it, so let's see what's happening. Some people did point it out. Okay, it's hard to replicate it. Okay, now if I press an X here, it is going to win. X is winning, but let's see what the message says. Draw. Why is that?
because last played is
So in the game model, what is our logic? Number of moves played less than 5, return false. Game is still going on. Number of moves played is 9, return true. But it did not get a chance to go here. It already returned true. In the ninth move, the number of moves played became 9 and it went out.
so it should be 10.
So we just need to change its position. We need to move it down and put it here. And this return false can just stay there. So what this will do is, after the ninth move, it will still look for who has won, and then if the number of moves is 9, it will return true. Otherwise, it will continue and return false. So now you try again and you will see that if you win the game on the last move, it will still tell you correctly who won the game. Multiple people have told me that they are not able to see the buttons when they click their game board. How many of you are having that problem? Now you are having, and someone else was having here. Okay, so what happens is that the game board, it shows these things in a certain order, and sometimes it can happen that the grid covers the buttons, so they are there but the grid is on top. So what you want to do is to fix that. If you notice that, just drag it to some other location. Let me just show you. If I put it here and if I run it, yeah, I should see that behavior, that some buttons will show and some will not. See, I'm clicking here, it's saying here that button was touched, but it's not displaying. So these buttons, randomly it showed. So the way to fix it is to just take it back to where it should be, the very first item. It should be the first item below the safe area. So where we are right now is we are able to play a game, we are able to display, and we have not only taken it to that point, we have also fixed certain things, such as if you click on an already occupied square, or if once the game is over, you click on blank square, none of that affects the game, the display. So this is where we want it to be. Now what we want to do is we want this. When the game is finished, we know who won the game, we know what moves were played. What we want to do is we want to be able to display it here one by one, each game. So our job now is to, when a game is finished, to save its information. And once the information is saved, we can recreate the game. So that's what we will do in the next class. We will see how to save the game, how to retrieve that information and populate the table, and recreate an old game from that table. We are at 8:45. I see some hands are up for questions. Do you have questions, or are you having? Do you have a question? Okay, that happens in life all the time, right? So I'll look at it. So for the rest of you who want to go home, you're welcome to do that, and we'll see you next time.
It's automatically saved, right?